as Martin Shaw would say.
Out and about. That's a very Canadian thing. Out and about.
He's out and about, eh?
Out and about.
Yeah, right. He's out and about.
Well, we are live, and just making sure my internet's okay. So far, so good.
Yeah, we were just doing our
Welcome,
Canadian
everyone.
impressions. Shari was doing her best Canadian impression, and I was too.
I don't have to work hard at it.
Yeah, she's got it. She's got it nailed. She's got the Canadian. She's got the Canadian accent nailed. Oh, he's
Whenever
Canadian,
anybody
you know.
says
That
out
was
and
like my.
about,
That's the one line that every Canadian will tell you. Like if you mention anything, anyone close, like even vaguely famous, they will be sure to quickly remind you that that person that you're talking about is Canadian, right?
yeah,
Like Brian
Canadian.
Adams. Oh yeah, he's Canadian, you know.
He's Canadian,
Okay.
eh?
Oh, did you know Jim Carrey is Canadian?
Mhm.
Did you know John Candy's Canadian, eh?
Did you
Oh
know
yeah.
William Shatner was Canadian?
Oh
Paul
yeah. Did
Anka
you
was
know Eugene Levy was Canadian? Gilda Radner, you know.
Martin Short.
Martin Short.
We know
Have
them
you
all.
seen Strange Brew? Did you know it's based on Macbeth? How many times did I hear? Like, it's so funny. It's just like this. It's like this national identity little
A
thing
Canadian
that
claim to fame.
everybody needs to let you know.
Yeah,
You know,
no.
like we know all the states and capitals. Do you know the provinces? Bonus points if you know the capitals, eh? Do you know who our president is? Because we know who yours is. No, I have such a special place in my heart for Canadians. I lived in Toronto, so in case you don't, people who are watching, in case you don't know, I was a Mormon missionary in Toronto for 2 years, and I part of that time I was in the city and was dealing with a lot of people from like I met people from over 110 different countries, but then I was also kind of in rural Canada for part of my mission, and really got to know like the natives, as they say. Well, the native. Okay, I don't want to get in that
Ontario
argument. Anyway,
but you were in
the ones who fled the American Revolution, I got to know them.
the
Really.
loyalists.
Yeah, the Tories.
Ooh, talk about woke right.
Yeah, right. Eh? I know. That's what I was telling my wife. She's just like, because we were talking about Alberta. We were watching hockey last night.
Yeah.
And she was like, "Where's Alberta?" I was like, "It's like basically just straight north of us." And she's like, "What are they like?" And I'm like, "Well, they're pretty much like Utah and Idaho. They're very similar." So they have the energy industry, and Mormons settled there. It's a very similar culture. And I said, but they're just not like as intense. Like the Canadians are. The Canadians are like Americans either love something or hate something, and Canadians are like, "Oh, it's pretty nice, eh?" Or, "Oh, I don't like that so much, eh?"
Well, that's
But
because
there's no like,
we live with winter.
yeah,
So it's like you learn to love the thing you hate.
Beautiful.
That's how it goes, Jeremy.
That's true. No, you guys are tough. You guys are tough. That's for sure. Canadians are tough.
Yeah, we know how to wait. We know how to be
Yeah.
patient. We know how to wait for things.
Yep, that's true. They know
Well,
how to wait for spring.
yeah. Christ is risen, my friend.
Truly, He's risen.
Yeah.
Or indeed, He is risen. Or,
Indeed.
I don't know. I can't remember other ones off the top of my head.
So we're going to tackle the Heliand again.
Glory to God. I love it.
I'm excited. I have been deep diving as much as possible into Old Saxon, Old Norse. You should see what the algorithm is serving up to me in recent days. I found a Saxon baptismal vow, not unlike the one in Orthodoxy, actually, very similar.
Wow.
But there was an actual rejection of Odin and I'm trying to think of the other two now, Thor and another god, which is considered not like Odin and Thor are Norse gods, but also Saxon. And But then there was this other one, Sax something or other. Can't remember the name of it. But I'll send you the video.
Okay. That
It's
sounds
the
cool.
Saxon baptismal vow.
Huh.
And what a like if you're a language person and a nerd like me and you for
Yeah.
that matter, what a great rabbit hole to fall down, like to
Yeah.
learning all about language and how it evolves and all the different dialects that you're dealing with and how, and it's so related to English and yeah.
Hmm.
I did
Well,
find out.
speaking of, I finally got the crown jewel of dictionaries. Okay, it would be probably second crown jewel. The crown jewel of dictionaries is a Samuel Johnson dictionary because he made
Okay.
like the first dictionary. But the second one is I did not get the full version of the Oxford Dictionary because that's expensive and I don't have the bookshelf space. But I did get the compact Oxford Dictionary, which is the whole Oxford Dictionary is it's like 13 volumes or 14 volumes crammed into 2 volumes with like 6-point type, and it comes with a magnifying glass.
Oh my God.
And it is so I love it. It
Oh,
came today. And speaking of, because I'm just tying it to
yeah, the
the
whole
evolution
language
of the
thing.
language. They have there it is unrivaled as far as etymology goes.
Oh,
If
really?
you like etymology,
I love
the
it.
Oxford Dictionary is the dictionary. So
Wow.
yeah, it's like they just have usage notes. Like I was just looking up my favorite word to look up in a new dictionary or an old dictionary in a one that I get is fear. Because fear is one of those words that have really changed over time and has a lot of definitions. And like there's like 40 definitions for fear in the Oxford Dictionary. And the usage notes go all the way back to like the 9th century, 8th
Mm.
century, tracing how it's been used and how it's evolved and what words it came from and all.
Oh, wow.
It's so good.
Can you give us a little hint, like where it comes from? Like a little,
Fear?
yeah.
Um, yes. One second. I'll actually share. There's a really good easy to read definition of it. Hold on, because this is actually fear is actually a really fun example of the impact of the Enlightenment, I think, and of just like 20th century modernism.
Interesting. I'm
So,
curious about fear.
this is the 1913 edition of Webster's, which is another one of my favorites, by the way. I'm sharing a screen. I don't know if you can see that.
Oh, sorry. There we
That's
go.
right. Okay. So fear. You see here, to be an apprehension of evil, to be afraid, to feel anxiety on account of some expected evil, right? All about evil. A variant of fear, a mate or a companion. That's obsolete from Spencer. So it was obsolete still back in 1913. So you can be sure no one's using that now.
Mm-hmm.
Fear, a coming suddenly upon fear, danger, akin to fair danger, Iceland, harm, mischief, plague, and English fair, peril. See, fair. A painful emotion or passion excited by the expectation of evil or the apprehension of impending danger, apprehension, anxiety, solicitude, alarm, dread. Now, this is my favorite part of this whole dictionary right here. The degrees of this passion, and this to me is the greatest tragedy that's happened to our language in the last 50 years. We've lost these gradients. The degrees of this passion, beginning with the most moderate, may thus be expressed apprehension, so that's the lowest level, then fear, then dread, then fright, and then terror. So there's a gradient of fear, that
Right.
apprehension of evil, right? And so when you hear an angel appears and they were frightened, right now we just go, oh, that was like one step away from abject terror,
Right.
right? They're
Yeah.
just we don't get that sense. We've lost this gradient from apprehension to fear to
Mhm.
dread to fright to terror,
Right.
right? And this is what I really like about older dictionaries is that they maintain these, they keep these gradients alive, and fear is one of my most interesting ones. Now, really quick, since we're on it, since you got me on this topic, I will share with you the modern definition of fear from the Webster's dictionary. So this is the same lineage, right? And if we
Yeah.
look up fear, an unpleasant, often strong emotion caused by anticipation or awareness of danger.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Anxious, concern.
Anxious concern, solicitude, profound reverence and awe, especially toward God, reason for alarm, right? So we've gone from a strong emotion. We went from an apprehension of evil to a
Mhm.
strong emotion caused by anticipation of danger. So we
Yeah.
went from the spiritual to the physical.
And I would just add, I think that there's a little bit of a diss on emotion in that. It's like a strong emotion. So you shouldn't worry about it too much because it's just a strong emotion. Like if you can think your way through it, you'll be okay, which is very much how psychiatry operates.
Yeah,
Um,
right.
so there's no real apprehension of evil in that sense because you can dismiss it as a strong emotion,
Right.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Although
McMillan,
most people now do not dismiss their strong emotions, they cultivate them.
well, yeah, but not yeah. Well, I don't know. Like it's kind of like what came first, the chicken? Like everybody's on antidepressants, trying
True.
trying
That's a good
to
point.
quell all these strong emotions, but McMo says with Jeremy's haircut, it looks like all of his hair is falling out of the bottom of his face.
Ah, true. This is true. Yes. Maybe blessed. Yeah.
Ah.
That's funny.
Well, it looks like McMo's a little behind. We live with winter, lol. Um,
Oh, he's on a work
McMo,
trip. All right. Nice.
yeah,
Oh, yeah. Please
McMo.
catch up.
We're not doing Lives of the Saints. Actually, we're doing the Heliand, which we started last week, which is
Yeah.
the Saxon Gospel. So we're reading the whole thing, and it's just fantastic. I hope you enjoy it. What was I going to say? There's something I was going to say about this. Oh yeah, fear. So here's something
Hmm.
that I kind of concluded for myself just through my own life experience is that what the enemy of a person living a Christian life, what the enemy wants is for that person to remain static. Okay,
Mm, mm.
and the only way you can do that to a person is to induce fear because fear paralyzes.
Mm.
And we live in a world that is just constantly fear inducing, right? If it
Yeah.
isn't one thing, it's another. Like, seriously, like every time you open up YouTube, you're like, there's something new to be afraid of, right?
Yeah.
So, anyway, I just wanted to add that. Um, and is it St. Paul says, we are not given a spirit of fear, but a
Yep.
spirit of boldness. So, yeah.
The
Jeremy,
and perfect love casteth out fear.
yeah, there you go. That too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Jeremy's loving dictionaries. Y'all are playing the hits.
Huge fan of dictionaries. Like
Mhm.
I, if I wasn't doing this show, I would be doing another show where I would be going over just like that, the word fear, where I would be talking about how it's changed over time, what it used to mean, what it means now, how it's used, how it used to
Well,
be
yeah,
used.
that's philology. That's what Barfield was into.
I
That's
am a super nerd about that stuff.
yeah,
Yeah.
you know what? I mean, I haven't read a dictionary for a long time because, I grew up and all that stuff.
Oh, right. Yeah. I put away childish things.
Yeah. But as a kid, I could read a dictionary for hours. Like,
Yeah.
it was my most favorite thing to do. I just loved dictionaries. I
Yeah.
love I
Well,
love
some of us were forced to read them for hours because we had to copy out of them as discipline.
Oh, you probably
Did you
did.
have to do that in school?
No, I was never
Oh,
disciplined.
oh,
I was
you were a
just
good kid.
a very
That's
good girl.
right. Well, I think some of my teachers knew that I was a nerd in disguise. And so, yeah, I had to copy.
Ah.
Like, that's what we had to do in detention a lot.
Well, I
Like
had to
a
write
copy out of
lines,
the
but
dictionary.
it was like, "I will not chew gum, I will not
Mm,
chew gum, I will not chew gum, I will not chew gum." And then
yeah.
I'm like, "Just see if you can make me." Next day, I'd be at school with gum in my mouth. Oh, one teacher cured me. I have to tell you this. So, I went to a new school and I was chewing gum, and he said, "Shari, we have a way of dealing with that. I want you to go up and stick your gum on that wall." And there was a wall. It was painted concrete blocks, you know
Mm,
those.
mhm.
And I want you to stick your gum on that wall and then take another one off of it. And that was
That's
the
funny.
last time I ever chewed gum in his class.
That's funny.
And that was in the no, that was in Ontario. Yeah, I was gonna say that was in the States, but it wasn't. Mhm. All right. Well, we want to start song 5. We're at
Yeah,
song
I would love to. Song
and
5.
for anybody who's just tuning in, we started reading the Heliand. That's why the title is the Heliand. We're taking a little
Yes.
break from Lives of the Saints. Although this is not really a break from Lives of the Saints because these are the saints of the gospel.
Yes.
And um, we've gone through the first 4 songs in the first episode. So if you want to catch up listening, you can do that. Now we're going to continue on with song 5. So do you want to start, Jeremy, or
Sure.
okay?
But I'm going to reimpose the rule though that
Mhm.
you are the reader of all footnotes
Oh, okay, okay, good thing.
because of your superior ability to pronounce German words. And
Okay,
Saxon's close enough. So,
I'm
song
trying
5. Oh,
trying
sorry,
to
go ahead.
learn it. I'm trying to learn it actually. I've been
Nice.
watching a lot of Saxon videos. Yeah. All right.
Song 5. The chieftain of mankind is born in David's hill fort. Then there came a decree from Fort Rome, from the great Octavian, who had power over the whole world, an order from Caesar to his wide realm, sent to every king enthroned in his homeland, and to all Caesar's army commanders governing the people of any territory.
All right.
Footnote.
That's footnote number 22. By eliminating the name of the specific governor given in Luke's gospel, Luke 2, 2-3, when Quirinius was governor of Syria, and by making the statement on governorships a general statement in the plural, the author has created the possibility of his audience identifying closely with his story, since the occupied country of the Saxons was ruled by military legates or legates. How do you say that, Jeremy?
Yeah,
Legates?
legates. Yeah.
Missi, sent from quote unquote Caesar in Aix la Chapelle. So obviously, he's not naming the governor on purpose.
Mhm.
Just the
Make it
Caesar.
more universal
Yeah, make
story.
it more universal. Okay.
It's said that everyone living outside their own country should return to their homeland upon receipt of the message. It's stated that all the warrior heroes were to return to their assembly place. Each one was to go back to the clan of which he was a family member by birth in a hill fort. That command was sent out over the whole world. People came together at all the hill forts. The messengers who had come from Caesar were men who could read and write, and they wrote everyone's name down very carefully in a report, both name and nationality, so that no human being could escape from paying the tax which each warrior had on his head. The good Joseph went also with his household, just as God, ruling mightily, willed it. He made his way to his shining home, the hill fort at Bethlehem. This was the assembly place for both of them, for Joseph the hero and for Mary the good, the holy girl. This was the place where in olden days the throne of the great and noble good King David stood for as long as he reigned, enthroned on high, an earl of the Hebrews. Joseph and Mary both belonged by birth to his household. They were of good family lineage of David's own clan. I have heard it told, footnote,
Footnote Thor Yifran Ik. Then I have learned or I found out. This appears to be an oral formula from heroic poetry indicating the beginning of an important passage. I translate it, I have heard it told whenever it occurs. So it's kind of like an attention getter, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, an oral formula from heroic poetry indicating the beginning of an important passage. I have heard it told.
I have heard it told that the shining workings of fate, and the power of God told Mary that on this journey a son would be granted her, born in Bethlehem, the strongest child, the most powerful of all kings, the great one come powerfully to the light of mankind, just as foretold by many visions and signs in this world many days before. At that time it all came to pass, just as wise men had said long ago, that the protector of people would come in a humble way, by his own power, to visit this kingdom of earth. His mother, that most beautiful woman, took him, wrapped him in clothes and precious jewels, and then with her 2 hands laid him gently, the little man, that child, in a fodder crib, even though he had the power of God and was the chieftain of mankind. There the mother sat in front of him and remained awake, watching over the holy child and holding it. And there was no doubt in the mind or in the heart of the holy maid. Footnote.
Footnote, there is this observation inserted by the author is no doubt a side remark aimed at his Saxons, urging them quietly, as he did in the Zachary story, not to doubt their new faith.
What had happened became known to many over this wide world. The guards heard it. As horse servants, they were outside. They were men on sentry duty, watching over the horses, the beasts of the field. They saw the darkness split in two in the sky, and the light of God came shining through the clouds and surrounded the guards out in the fields. Those men began to feel fear in their hearts. They saw the mighty angel of God coming toward them. He spoke to the guards face to face and told them that they should not fear any harm from the light. I am going to tell you, he said, something very wonderful, something very, very deeply desired. I want to let you know something very powerful. Christ is now born. On this very night, God's holy child, the good chieftain, at David's hill fort. What happiness for the human race, a boon for all men. You can find him, the most powerful child, at Fort Bethlehem. Take what I now tell you in truthful words as a sign. He is there, wrapped up, lying in a fodder crib, even though he is king over all the earth and the heavens, and over the sons of all the peoples, the ruler of the world. Just as he said that word, an enormous number of the holy army, the shining people of God, came down to the one angel from the meadows of heaven, saying many words of praise for the Lord of peoples. They then began to sing a holy song as they wended their way through the clouds towards the meadows of heaven. The guards heard how the angels in their power praised the Almighty God most worshipfully in words. Glory now be, they said, to the Lord chieftain himself in the highest reaches of heaven, and peace on earth to the sons of men, men of good will, those who, because of their clear minds, recognize God. The herdsmen understood that something great had been told to them, a merry message. They decided to go to Bethlehem that that night they wanted very much to be able to see Christ himself.
Okay, so there was a footnote about the watching over the horses part.
Oh, I'm sorry. All the way
That's
back
okay.
there.
That's okay. I wanted you to
Sorry.
just read through it anyway. It's okay.
I missed that one.
The beasts of the field. So it says here, the famous sheep and shepherds of Christmas Eve are transformed by the author into horses and horse guards. This cannot be because sheep, wool, and shepherds were unknown in the north. Quite the opposite should have been the case in a climate where woolen clothing was preferred. The reason must lie in the social unacceptability of shepherds. The Heliand is at great pains to show that Joseph and Mary are upper class, of good family, born inside the hill fort. And sheep herders cannot have been acceptable recipients for angelic messages in the eyes of the Saxon warrior nobility. Saxon and Carolingian law accepted a rigid stratification of society into three classes. The serfs, servants, slaves were at the bottom of society. Freemen, farmers, fishermen, artisans were the middle class. And the warrior nobility of the hill forts and mead halls were the upper class. Since horses were a prized item of the upper class, and the horse guards, the marshals and equerries of the high Middle Ages, who were responsible for the horses even at night, must have been their picked and trusted servants. The Christmas Eve scene is made familiar to the warrior class, and the alienation that might have been caused by retaining serfs, sheep, and shepherds is avoided. Interesting.
Yeah, that is.
Yeah, the footnotes are fantastic. Hi, Ezekiel. It's nice to have you. Oh, it's Zeke. Hi, Zeke. I didn't recognize you. All right. 26 was they wanted very much to be able to see Christ himself. The reader may have noticed the complete omission in the Heliand of the no room for them at the inn part of the nativity story. Apparently, such inhospitable treatment of a well-born noble couple would have been unthinkable in a Saxon hill fort, especially if it were the home fort of their own clan. And thus the author had transposed the story. The author would have been obliged to omit it for consistency's sake. So one of the things I wanted to say about this, the Heliand, which is really interesting from what I've gathered, and, I could be wrong because it's just been a little smattering of this and that on the internet, is that this is one of the longest full texts of Saxon that they have at hand. They've got fragments of Genesis, and they've got fragments of the Heliand from other areas of Europe, but they don't have a lot of written Saxon. So the Heliand has been really important in understanding the language, and it's also a missionary book. So it was meant to convert Saxons into Christians. And that's why the writer of the Heliand has been very careful to make it relatable to their culture, which is interesting.
Yeah, it brings a whole different element to the idea of translation, right? We've been talking about that a lot recently, where it's like there's so many different things to take into consideration when you're doing a translation.
Yeah, there's a First Nations Bible out there that is also really beautiful to read, because they do that a little bit too. Like they try to keep it, relatable. All right, shall I read song 6?
Sure.
All right, I'll do that. The angel of God had shown the horse guards with a shining sign that they themselves could go to God's baby son. They soon found him, the chieftain of clans, the lord of peoples. They praised God, the ruler, with their words, and made known widely all over the shining hill fort what a brilliant holy vision from the meadows of heaven they had been shown out there in the fields. The lady, the holy girl, the maid, kept in her mind and in her heart whatever she heard the men saying. The mother, the loveliest of ladies, then fittingly brought up the chieftain of many men, the holy heavenly child, on love. And there's a footnote here. This forms a perfect companion piece to John the Baptist's upbringing. Zachary was informed that his son John was to be a warrior companion, Yesed, of the King of Heaven and Christ, and thus to be raised in the virtue of loyalty, Troia. Christ is to be the chieftain of many such warriors, and thus is brought up fittingly on the appropriate reciprocal virtue, love, Minea. So John was to be a warrior companion and had to be raised to be loyal And the reciprocal virtue is love. Isn't that interesting?
Well, and then we talked about that last week, where the warrior companions, it was a kind of a footnote that talked about that. The warrior companions were like the chief guards, the closest guards for the king, right? So it was like the round table, like the
Yeah.
knights of the round table, or
Right.
and then which brought up cherubim as well, right? Which were the
Right.
the cherubim had the legs of an ox and
Oh
body of a
yeah.
lion
Yeah.
and wings of a eagle and the head of a man, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like the four creatures,
Yeah.
the
That
four
was really
corners of the earth. Yeah.
interesting.
So anyway, I was just trying to give context for some of the people who might not have been here last week, because that's something I've been thinking about all week.
Have you? Oh, we'll have to
Yeah.
talk more about that after.
Well, and the other thing I wanted to mention really quick, there was a phrase in the last song that I just love, where they came, like the angels came down from the meadows of heaven.
I
I
know.
love that
I
phrase.
know. I know.
So
It's amazing.
beautiful. Yeah, it's really beautiful.
Yeah. It's kind of conjures up abundance, a scene of abundance, right? Like a meadow would be a place where people and livestock could thrive. And
Yeah, well, and it's like, you're in a forest, and then when you're in a forest and then you come to a meadow, it's
it's
always a relief. It's like a
mhm.
it's like a resting place. It's just not, it just, you can't even help it. It just turns on, it's just, you're just like, oh, this is beautiful. And
Oh
that's where the animals come to feed in the morning and in the evenings, and
yeah,
that's where you hunt.
yeah,
You camp out on you hide in the edge of the forest waiting for the animals to come. I mean, there's a lot going on in a meadow and a forest. There's just
yeah,
so much
and
going on that's very
yes,
rich.
it and Heidegger uses that idea as the place that we have to enter into in order to. I don't know exactly how he puts it, but from what I've gathered, it's where you. I would say somehow are the most integrated. That's what it is in my mind, anyways.
The most what?
Integrated
Oh,
is
okay.
is in what he calls the clearing, right? So
Mm,
this is
hmm.
a philosophical place to be, right? Where
Mm,
you your
yeah.
mind, you have to move into the clearing.
Mm.
So
It's also because it's also a place of danger, right? It's
Mhm.
beautiful, but it's dangerous because
Vulnerable,
you're
yeah.
vulnerable.
Yes,
You're
that's
not
true.
hidden by the trees anymore.
Yes.
You're out in the
Animal
light.
prey animals are always really careful about entering in
Yes.
to a
Yeah.
clearing. And then the other thing that comes to my mind is that beautiful song that I love, where he says there's a line in it says, "Society is just a clearing in the forest."
Mm. Wow.
Mhm.
That's
Yeah,
nice.
which is probably a nod towards Heidegger as well. But anyway,
Yeah. And a
uh,
nod toward not living in particular cities. Anyway.
I wasn't going to say that,
I'll do it.
but
I've had more scotch than you tonight.
all right. So the mother brought up the chieftain of many men, the holy heavenly child, on love. See that? I just got to say this too. So he's the chieftain of all men, and he's being brought up on love. That's not making him a sap. That's making him a true ruler, worthy of the name.
Noblesse oblige, right?
Yeah, well, because his warrior companions are raised in the virtue of loyalty. So he has to be love, right? He has that reciprocal virtue is love. So if it wasn't, he would just be a tyrant. Wouldn't care about his warrior companions. All right. Many of the heroes, the earls, very intelligent men, spoke on the 8th day with God's girl, saying that the child should have the name Healer, just as the angel of God Gabriel said in truthful words when he, as God's messenger, gave this command to the woman. That had been at the moment she first conceived the child, as he came shining into this world. She very much wanted to keep the child in this holy way. She was very glad to take care of him. The year slipped further by until God's Son of Peace was 40 days and 40 nights of age. There was a duty which parents were obliged to perform. They had to bring him to Jerusalem to the ruler at his shrine. That was the way it was then. That was the country's custom, one that no woman among the Hebrews could omit. The first time a woman gave birth to a son, she always brought him to God's shrine. And so Joseph and Mary, those two good people, decided to leave Bethlehem. They had the baby with them, the Holy Christ, and went to visit the house of God in Jerusalem. There they were to worship the ruler at the shrine according to the ways of the Jewish people. At the shrine, they found a good old man of noble birth at the altar. He had lived many of the winters and summers of his life at that shrine, where he performed the divine praises with a clear mind. He had the Holy Spirit, a happy heart. Simeon was his name. The ruler's power had shown him a long time ago that he would not leave this light. He would not make the journey from this world before his wish was granted that he should see Holy Christ himself, the Holy King of Heaven. At that moment, his heart became extremely happy within him. He saw the child coming into the shrine. He gave thanks to the ruler, the Almighty God, that he saw him with his own eyes. Simeon went toward him, and gladly the old man took him in his arms. He recognized all of it, the sign, the vision, and the Son of God, as well, the Holy King of Heaven. Now, Lord, he said, will I gladly ask you, since I am now very old, that you let your devoted servant go away from here, to travel under your peaceful protection to where my forefathers, brave warriors, went when they left this world. My wish is fulfilled on this most precious day, now that I have seen my chieftain, my gracious Lord, just as it was promised to me long ago. You are a powerful light to all foreign peoples who have not yet recognized the all-ruler's might. And your coming, my Lord, chieftain, brings glory and honor to the sons of Israel, your own clan, your own dear people. The old man spoke secretly with the good woman at the altar, and in soothsaying told her how her son would be the downfall of many of the sons of men and the help of many others here in the middle world. Pleasure to those who follow his teaching, pain to those who do not want to hear the teachings of Christ. You will have sorrow in the future, he said. You will suffer pain in your heart when Hero's sons overwhelm him with weapons. Then your great work will begin, to bear sorrow. The young girl understood the wise man's words completely. Then an old woman also came walking into the sanctuary. Anna was her name, Phanuel's daughter. She had served her chieftain well in gratitude. She was a mature woman. After her maidenhood, she, the noble girl, was married to an earl on his property. For 7 winters she and her bridegroom ruled his lands together. Then I have heard it told that sorrow came to her, that the mighty power of the measurer, and there is a footnote here, method of the measurer. Method is one of the words for God or fate as the ultimate determiner of the length of existence for any person or thing. In the Heliand, it is clear that the author does not wish to use this word as the translation for the God of the Christians, even though this had been done in England. So the sentence again, then I have heard it told that sorrow came to her, that the mighty power of the measurer separated them, the cruel workings of fate. And then there's another footnote. Urdigiscapu, the workings of fate. Whenever a death is involved, the author prefers to have giscapu, workings, bear the immediate responsibility for determining the event and above all its timing. If it is a case of the beginning of a life, then occasionally one sees in some of the manuscripts godes, gods, inserted ahead of what some copyists might have seen as the too dangerously pagan concept of giscapu, workings. So it's more of a fate thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
After that, she was a widow at the shrine of peace for 84 winters of her lifetime. And so she never went away from the shrine, but served God, her chieftain, well there by day and by night. She too came walking toward them at the same moment. She immediately recognized God's child and let the heroes know, the warriors at the shrine, the great and welcome news, saying that the rescuer's salvation had come to them, help from the King of Heaven. Now the Holy Christ, the ruler himself, has come to this shrine to deliver the people, the poor people who for so long now have been waiting in this middle world for such a long time. Now let mankind rejoice over this. Many of the people at the shrine were overjoyed. They heard the great and welcome news being said about God. The woman had performed the sacred task there, the worship at the altar, just as it was commanded in their law and in the book in the bright shining hill fort. And the footnote there is, while it is clear that the presentation in the temple was commanded in the old law, it seems unclear, to me at least, what the author is referring to as the book in the fort, unless he means again the Old Testament. The Holy Family, Joseph and Mary, set off for home then and left Jerusalem. They always had the King of Heaven, the son of the chieftain, the protector of multitudes, as their companion. And the footnote there is a truly remarkable concept in Saxon terms. One could not even think of having a king as a warrior companion. It should be the opposite. One might dream of being the companion of a king. In the Heliand, the wonder of the incarnation is expressed movingly by saying that Mary and Joseph had not an earthly warrior, but the King of Heaven as one of their warrior companions. Thus it was that the news did not spread any further in this world than he wished. That was the King of Heaven's intention. All right, I'm going to just take a break. Somebody's at the door here, so.
Okay. Hey, Matt Parlato is a late arrival, but we're glad he's here. Hello. Welcome. We are reading the Heliand. We're taking a little break from Lives of the Saints. We both decided that we loved the Heliand. I read it during Great Lent. I read not the translation we're reading here. I read a more poetic one. I don't know if I have it handy. But anyway, I fell in love with it during Great Lent, and we talked about it. And so then Shari was like, "Well, let's just read that." So we're on the Heliand, and the Heliand is the Saxon Gospel. So it was a translation, not just into the Saxon language, but also into the Saxon culture, and it's in the form of an epic poem, much like it's very similar to Beowulf, actually, in structure and form. But we're just reading through that. So, but Shari had to go answer her door, and now I'm here, bereft and abandoned. So I'm just going to go ahead and start reading Song 7, because you would rather hear that than me. Song 7. 3 Thanes from the east, led by the workings of fate, follow a star. Even though holy men were there recognized Christ, still it had not yet become known at the king's court to the men who in their attitude were not very inclined to him, and it remained hidden from them in word and in deed until men of the east, very wise men, 3 strong thanes, came to this people, walking the long road over the land to get there. They were following a bright shining beacon, and with clear mind were looking for God's child. And there's a footnote there.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right.
Note 32.
No, 32, yes.
This concept is not clarified until later in the work, where clear-minded behavior is identified with single-minded devotion and unswerving loyalty to one's chief. Its opposite, therefore, would not be muddled or illogical thinking, but rather double-mindedness, vacillation in one's attitude and intentions. They were following a bright shining beacon and with clear mind. So they weren't vacillating, or they weren't double-minded. They were single-minded devotion and unswerving loyalty to one's chief.
Faithful. They wanted to kneel to him, to go and become his followers. God's fate workings were leading them on. They found Herod there, the powerful man sitting in his hall, the slithery-mouthed king, angrily talking with his men. He always enjoyed murder. The wise men addressed him in his house properly and fittingly in the royal manner, and he soon asked what business brought these warriors out on a journey far from home. Are you bringing wound gold to give to someone? Why are you traveling like this, walking on foot? There's a
Okay,
footnote
there's
there.
2 footnotes there. To
Yep.
whom? It could be, instead of why are you traveling, it could be to whom are you traveling? And walking on foot. The reader, like Herod, may have noticed the absence of the traditionally required camels. Unlike the sheep who are missing from the shepherd story, I do not think that the absence of camels requires a sociological explanation. In the dominant Byzantine art of the period, the wise men are depicted walking on foot as they follow the star, generally wearing attire associated in the art of the Roman Empire, east and west, with the Persians. I do not know when the custom began in Europe of depicting the wise men as riding on camels, but they are so represented in England 400 years later at the time of the Crusades. Herod's shock in the Heliand is probably to be understood as surprise at the failure of traveling noblemen to be mounted on horses. So to be walking on foot would not be a noble venture, I guess.
I do not even know where you come from, earls of other types. Oh, of other peoples. Sorry. I don't even know where you come from, earls of other peoples. I can see that you are of noble birth, clansmen of good family. Never before have such messengers come here from other peoples since I have ruled this noble and wide kingdom. You are to tell me truthfully, in front of these people of our country, why you have come to this land. Then the men of the East answered him, those word-wise warriors. We can easily tell you the truth of our business and say to you openly why we have come here from the East on this journey to your country. A long time ago, there were noblemen, men of good speech, who promised so much good and help in truthful words from the King of Heaven. At that time, there was a wise man, a man of experience and great wisdom. This was a long time ago, our ancestor there in the East. Footnote.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm
Sorry.
so absorbed in this story.
Yeah, that's good.
Our ancestor there in the East. This seems to be very much the creation of the author. It is not clear what figure might form the basis for this thought. Zoroaster might be thought of, but it is equally possible that this quote unquote ancestor of the people of the East represents the fact that pre Christian peoples had access to God's word, a thought not unwelcome to the Saxons. Oh, I love that.
There has never been since then a single man who spoke so wisely. He was able to interpret God's speech.
Okay, so this is Hemata Rekien Spell Gotas. And spell Gotas is literally God's spell, right?
Yeah.
Which is gospel. The play on words is clear in the original Saxon. He could interpret God's spell, in brackets, gospel. And this, the author affirms, outside the Hebrew religion and before Christianity. Thus, once again, the author is implicitly respecting the possibility of divine revelation in Germanic religion as well.
He was able to interpret God's speech because the Lord of mankind had granted him the ability to hear the ruler's words up above from down on earth. For this reason, this Thane's knowledge and his thoughts were great. When the time came for him to depart, to leave the earth and the throng of his relatives, to give up the comings and goings of men, and to travel to the other light. Footnote.
This is just seems to be a reference.
Okay. A reference to a book. Okay.
Yeah.
To the comings and goings of men, and to travel to the other light, he told his followers, his heirs and his earls, to come closer, and told them truthfully in soothsaying everything that came afterwards, everything that has happened since in this world. Then he said that a wise king, great and mighty, was to come here to the middle world. He would be of the best lineage. He said that it would be God's son, and that he would rule this world forever, both the earth and the heavens, for days without end. He said that on the same day on which his mother gave birth to him, blessedly in this middle world, in the east there would shine a bright light in the sky, such as we had never had before between the earth and the heavens, nor anywhere else. Never such a baby, nor such a beacon. He ordered that 3 men of the people should go to do adoration. He told them to remember well that when they saw God's beacon journeying upward, they should get ready immediately. He said that we were to follow it as it goes before us in a westerly direction over this world. Now, this has all happened. It has come true by the power of God. The king is born, daring and strong. We saw his beacon light shining cheerfully among the stars of heaven, and thus I know that the holy chieftain powerfully placed it there himself. Every morning we saw the bright star shining, and went toward it, following the beacon all the time over roads and through forests. The greatest of our desires was to be able to see him himself, to know where we should look for him, the king of this empire. Tell us to which clan he has been born. At that, Herod felt pain in his chest and in his heart. His mind began to reel. His spirit was worried. He had just heard it said that he was to have a more powerful king of good clan over his head, that there was a more fortunate person than he among his warrior companions. Then he called together all the good men in Jerusalem, the most learned and eloquent, and those who truly held the most book power in their breasts. And he asked them very carefully with words that evil-minded man, the king of the people, where Christ, the greatest man of peace, was to be born in the earthly realm. The people then responded to him, men of truth, saying that they did indeed know that he was to be born in Bethlehem. It has been put down thus in our books, wisely written, just as the soothsayers, very intelligent and learned men, spoke long ago by the power of God. It is from Bethlehem that the herdsman of Hillforts, the beloved protector of the country, is to come to the light, the mighty counselor who shall rule the Jewish people and who will distribute his gifts generously throughout the middle world to many peoples.
So there's a footnote for herdsman of Hillforts. Burgo Hirdi, an unusual image. Perhaps visually, what the author is suggesting is this. As one looks at a hill fort on the top of a hill, one sees a group of rounded thatched roof houses, and the mead hall surrounded by a palisade. He suggests it looks nothing more than a herd of tawny animals enclosed within the posts of their corral. Christ he then sees as the herdsman of these corrals, the protector of hill forts. Oh, that's interesting.
Wow.
Yeah. All right. We've been going for an hour, Jeremy. Do we want to drop a link if anybody wants to hop in with us?
Yeah, sure.
And we'll do that. Okay. There's a link in the chat if anybody wants to hop in. Share any thoughts that they've been having while listening. What was it? We were going to do a little history of the Saxon people. Did you get to that or not?
I did. I started gathering material. I don't really have anything super organized, but I did find the book I was referring to. I found Geoffrey of Monmouth's The History of the Kings of Britain.
Okay.
This is phenomenal. It is mythical, so you can just take your historical criticism nonsense and go back to 19th century Germany where you belong. I also have this beautiful book, the Anglo-Saxon Chronicles, and this covers The authentic voices of England from the time of Julius Caesar to the coronation of Henry II. And so, yeah, it covers from basically the birth of Christ up through the mid 12th century. And it draws from the the first part of it is the part that was written by King Alfred the Great, and then further kings kept continuing that. But the chronicle that King Alfred the Great wrote was actually based a lot on the ecclesiastical history of the church, which was written by Saint Bede,
right,
around the 6th century, I believe. So I don't have a physical copy of that, but I do have a PDF of that. So I've been using those three and kind of putting together a fun timeline.
Good.
Of what's going
Well, we'll
on.
just leave you to it then.
Yeah. So it'll be next week. I'm sorry, but I have been working on it.
Yeah. Well, I dropped a link for anybody listening. If you want to jump in, that would be great. We love talking about this. I love to hear anybody's thoughts. Like Jeremy said before we started this, there are some turns of phrases in here that just really seem to make the story more powerful, more cool, McMo. More potent. Is that a good word, Jeremy?
Yeah, that's good. I think it's again and again, I just keep coming back to this idea that it's like I've heard the scriptures a lot of times. I've heard the Gospels a lot. I've read them a lot. I'm very familiar, and I fear that I've become too familiar with them at times, where I've like I know them in my head, but I'm not familiar enough to actually live them. But I do know them well, and because of that, it almost feels like some of the depth and some of the beauty gets lost because I'm too familiar with it. And having this new view of the gospel stories through a different cultural lens has been really beneficial for me, because it's like being reintroduced to the gospels, and being re-shocked and reanimated into the awe that they truly deserve. You know, it's been really helpful for my spirituality and for my relationship with Christ, to be reintroduced to these stories through this lens and through the Heliand. I mean, and you know, these are my ancestors. I come from Leeds, so you know, it's meaningful to me as well to reconnect with that history of my people.
Yeah. Okay, now I'm getting signals that my internet's sucking. Is it okay?
It looks fine. No, it's okay. And you're not delayed. Speaking of phrases that stood out, I really liked then he called together all the good men in Jerusalem, the most learned and eloquent, and those who truly held the most book power in their breasts. And he asked them very carefully with words, that evil-minded man, the king of the people, where Christ, the greatest man of peace, was to be born in the earthly realm. The most book power in their breasts. I thought that was really interesting. They have the most book power in their breasts.
And I mean, this is at a time when there weren't a lot of books.
Right.
Like, so what does that even mean? Like, what is a book to them? Like, is a book actually a book, or is it an oral story? Like, it seems to me like an oral story.
Yeah.
Hey, y'all.
Wow.
How's it going?
Hello.
Good,
Christ is risen.
Risen indeed. I have missed you two. I feel like I've watched the Lives of the Saints. I know you guys took a little bit of a Lenten hiatus, but I see you guys back tonight, and I'm also on a work trip, so it's like when I normally get to hang out late, you know, because can't sleep because my wife and my dog are miles and miles away. But man, this has just been so good. I have a couple of thoughts if you guys are down for me to just release the fire hose.
Please.
So I am really vibing and agreeing with you guys on the value of hearing this translated. But it's a
Mhm.
weird thing, right? Because we already have the translated text. And so it's like this doubly translated thing. But what the sense that I kept getting in listening to it was the same sense as when you hear someone put something in their own words, right? That phrase of put this in your own words. And so that brings with it this whole cavalcade of references of like what is proper teaching, and the idea of like, well, you've taught something well if the student can put it in his or her own words. And but then I also just thought about the value of the kind of lowercase e ecumenicism that we have developed over the years on this in this online space, and just the value of hearing people from different traditions and with different turns of phrase speak to the very same truths that have
Mhm.
been passed down, and there's a real sense of enlivening, a real sense of invigoration when you hear it put slightly differently, and I just think that's so wonderful. And so because it connects, and so here I'll get into two controversial things. The first will be conservative, and then the second will be liberal, quote unquote, right? Quote
Sweet.
unquote. Um, so one of the things,
I don't
we'll
even
start
know
with
what
the
those mean, but anyway.
yeah, I just like to plant a flag, and it's kind of like a warning on a video game or a movie, right? Like these next few
Okay.
musings are rated R for R for conservative and L for woke, you know.
Okay.
But so the first one was one of the things that I remember hearing John Piper say, the dreaded John Piper, that has really stuck with me, that I think is a really valuable insight, which is um, just the fact that the nations retain their, and this is a very orthodox idea, right? Like this can only be a mind bending truth for a Protestant evangelical, but the idea that in Revelation and in the kingdom of God to come, that the nations somehow keep their particularity,
Mhm.
and that it's the nations that praise Christ the King over all the earth. And so there's a way in which, you know, me and Jeremy may still be American in the life to come, which is just an interesting fact. But what it does is that it's basically it's back to Paul, right? Like there is no Jew and Gentile, but there's a strange way in which we keep our everything good from the Gentiles, and the Jew keeps everything good from Judaism. Um, and so there's something about that, and just the vibes of hearing this kind of secondary translation or something. Um, and then the woke side is something to what you were just talking about, Jeremy, the kind of connection to our past. Um, Back in my McWoke days, I listened to a few extremely socially liberal Christian podcasts. And one of them was a group of African American ladies. And the premise of the podcast was that, like, that this was basically a podcast for, like, by black women for black women, and so I was definitely an interloper in terms of should I be listening to it or not.
I could see why
And
you were listening. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Uh, but there was something they said that really struck with me in a similar way as to what Piper said, but it was much more of like a political commentary, but because it was on it's on the topic of whiteness, and I don't think we need to go down this rabbit trail. But merely what they brought up, and I hadn't thought about this before, but one of the things that um, growing up in America or growing up in the South is that there's this reification of whiteness, right? And so instead of me and that affects my self-conception, right? And so instead of thinking of myself as, you know, what my 23andMe DNA tests say I am, which is from the British Isles, almost like 99%. I like to joke that my wife got this full work through, and it had all these pie charts explaining all of her different nationalities. and then they just sent me a blank white sheet of paper because they were basically like, you are from the British Isles, my good sir, and there's nowhere else. And so,
You'd
but
fit
what
right
these,
in Utah.
yeah, exactly. uh, but so the thing they said that really struck me was that it was they saw it as an extreme tragedy that because of this kind of cheap conception of whiteness and blackness, that many so-called white people were completely cut off from their national heritage, from their cultural heritage. So instead of being like an Irish American, well, I'm just a white guy, I'm just a white guy.
Right.
And that's an extreme tragedy, that's something to be mourned. And so those were some of the things that I saw kind of, or at least going through my mind as I was listening through this Anglo-Saxon. And that's kind of to say nothing about the poetic language that's just like gorgeous, like
Mhm.
word wise warrior, like that's a English phrase written for English people, that it's got
Yeah.
that feeling.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's like Philosopher King, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have when you were talking about the peculiarities or the particularities, that's the word, the particularities being preserved. It reminded me of this icon. Now, this icon might blow some people's minds, but it's one of my favorites. This is the Tower of Babel in the background, and these are the three angels that are coming down and basically sending out the nations into the world, and you can see them dressed in their different cultures, and so basically the tradition is that there were 70 nations that were formed at that time, and they were sent out into the world, all over the world, and given their own language. And you can see the angels. I'll zoom in a little bit. You can see the angels. Each one of them have a ruling angel that is
Mhm.
assigned to that nation to rule them and to teach them. Now, the tradition is that those angels became prideful and then turned the hearts of the people away from worshiping the one true God, and those angels became fallen angels and taught the people to worship the angel instead of the one true God. This is what Paul was talking about, where he said the rulers of the nations are, the gods of the nations are demons. And that's what, but here at the beginning, this is at the beginning where these nations are basically blessed and sent out into the world, and they have their particularities. And in the Orthodox view, this is basically ratified and blessed and redeemed on the day of Pentecost, when the apostles were speaking in their native tongue, but all of the people heard it in their own tongue, right? And so that's where, and then in the book of Revelation, it says that, the kings of the world will come back and they'll bring their people back, but they'll be bringing their own art, their own beauty, their own songs, into New Jerusalem. So,
Well, and that's,
and they'll be going in and out.
yeah, they'll be going in and out, right?
In and out.
I'm so glad you
Because,
brought that up. Oh, go ahead. Keep going.
well, I'm a slow talker. But they go in and out because Jesus says, I am the door, and it's through me that the sheep go in and out and find pasture. So this is where the in and out comes from. That's also, that verse is in the Gospel of John, and Revelation is also written by John. So I would say that he's referring back to this idea of Christ being the door. So Tomberg used that verse as an illustration to show how Teilhard de Chardin could go in and out of the occult sciences because he went through Christ. So
Well,
anyway, just wanted to add that.
I love that because it's making me wonder, I suppose, in both sense of the homonym, wander and wonder,
Mhm.
in the sense that, because I was thinking about the Tower of Babel while you were reading it, because there's a way in which well, I don't want to go too far, but or I don't want to get ahead of my thought here, but you could almost see the reversal of the Tower of Babel in the type of, and I'm going to keep using the term, even though I know it's fraught, but ecumenicism. Like there's a sense in which after like the Tower of Babel is, I have no clue what you're talking about, and New Jerusalem is, oh, I see exactly what you're talking about. And I never would have put it that way. And so, but it's exactly that transition of the door, right? That kind of that literal pivot point, um, that kind of redeems or enables or well, it's doing more than one thing, but at the very least, it's marking that transition of I have no clue what you're talking about into I know, oh, I see exactly what you're talking about. And it's just interesting how that's even echoed in the fact that we are reading this like modernized translation of an Anglo-Saxon retelling of this Aramaic story told in Greek. Like that, it's all those layers, and you can almost see like Christ working through history to make this moment right now possible. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I had a martini at the bar and I'm sleepy. So please keep me in check, folks.
No, it's great.
No, I'm totally on board with what you're saying. I agree. And I think that's a really nice way of putting it, that transition from, the scattering and then the gathering, right? There's the scattering of the nations and they go out and they're blessed. And then there's a gathering of the nations at the end. Right. And we all come together and feast on Leviathan.
Yes, and Judaism talks about it as the shattering of the vessels. Same idea.
Yeah.
Where the divine light is contained, right, in all the vessels. And I mean, I personally loved the footnote in here that I read, if I can find it again, about here. Well, not finding it. Where was it? Maybe it was in the part you read, Jeremy.
While you're looking, I was going to say that even in the footnotes, I feel like we see that pattern, because the translator is basically saying like, yeah, the one that came to mind was the sheep versus the horses, right? Like they could have used the sheep, but they decided to use the horses for these particular reasons instead of, A, B, and C or whatever. But even in that, you see a type of, I don't know the right word, but almost like a universal being made particular that doesn't infringe on the truth of the universal in some way. And so there, you could you could say that that's a certain type of hierarchy or a certain type of sequentialism, but I'm content and just say that it's really cool.
Yeah. It reminds me in spirit of like, so we just looked at a Byzantine icon, but I'll pull up an Ethiopian icon while Shari, because I think Shari has her.
I don't think I can find it. I don't know where it went. It must have been, it's magically disappeared.
That happens sometimes. Sometimes things hide from you.
Yeah. I've never, all footnotes disappear from me. It's just, I never see them.
These ones are too juicy not to include. They're so interesting, I find.
There was one in particular I wanted to find. Hold on one second. Oh, well, I could share the. Hold on. There's this one that I want to get printed. It's amazing. I don't have it. Oh, there it is. This one. I'm going to share this real quick. So kind of what you were talking about, McMill, where it's like, these patterns are eternal patterns, right? They're heavenly patterns, but they're heavenly patterns manifested through a culture, right? And that culture is the context. So the pattern is not just like a concept that floats in the sky.
That
It
is
comes
amazing.
down and it is incarnated, and so this is an Orthodox icon. This is an Ethiopian Coptic icon.
And
And what
look
is
at
it?
yeah, like give me some context. Is it cherubim?
Yes, these are cherubim and seraphim.
Okay.
There's some great icons. The Ethiopian icons. It's kind of fun just because you kind of get like a lot of the Western minds look at the Byzantine icons and they're like, I don't really like this. But here you can see, the same patterns are coming through, but they're coming through in a different cultural expression.
Is that the first Black Jesus?
There's
Well,
lots of Black Jesuses in the Ethiopian icons, that's for
yeah,
sure.
for what it's worth, and
Right?
Free
With
Willian in
Angel
the
Gabriel.
comments. Yeah, Free Willian in the comments can roast me for being McWoke, but I've always had a certain affinity for Black Jesus. But I think you're dead right with this is why Christianity is ever ancient and ever new, right? Because in the first century
Mm.
it was Jews and Gentiles, and how do we welcome these complete outsiders into the kingdom of God? And now it's a very similar thing, right? We're still in need of, I hesitate to call it translation, but I think it is just translation, right? And it's the same type of translation that goes from language to language as goes from individual to individual. Because I kind of need people to put it into their own words and say it afresh and say it anew so that so that it's real to me.
Yeah,
But
because
Right.
it's
the reason is
y-
because we we stop listening to stuff that we human beings crave novelty. And so the more we repeat phrases and say things, the less people hear them. I said this the other day, I think to Rigel. I was like, and you have to use like our languages become more and more abstracted and more theological, and it just it what it does is it starts to be way out here, right? It's way out there, and this language in the Heliand is right here. It's
Yeah.
really close. It's very close to your life and your chest. So I don't know. I just
that just gave me an image, Sherry, of like because I'm thinking of like Paul saying like I need, I'm going to be all things to all people so that I might win some. And the idea of like sailing out in a boat into the trackless sea of abstraction so that I may save a few autists and bring them back into their bodies. Like that seems like there's something to that, right? Like
do you really think that the autists prefer abstraction?
I'm just using pejoratives to be funny. Forgive
Well,
me.
I'm
Uh
asking an honest question because that sounds like that's what you think. And I actually don't think that.
I think that
I
some
think everybody
people,
can relate to the
yeah, yeah.
close to the chest, pedestrian, easy to understand.
Yeah,
Um,
I think in general, I guess the way, I don't know if maybe you can tell me if this is a disagreement or not, but the way that I think I would put it is something like there are various proclivities towards, like the close at home chest feeling, towards the pie in the sky, my brain is in the clouds with the divine forms experience. And to call them autistic or not is probably not helpful. But the main point that I think that I want to make is something like, for those who are far off, Christ goes far off, and for those who need him
sure.
close, he's close, kind of a thing.
Well, the piece
But
that
yeah,
the footnote I was looking for that I loved so much was how the author of the Heliand didn't dismiss the gods of the Germanic tribes, right?
Mm.
It had maybe it was that
Yeah.
Zoroaster
It
note.
had to
I
do
can't
with the
remember.
fate. Yeah, with the fates as well, right?
Who was that? And
well, yeah, and was that at the part where they were talking, the footnote that was talking about Odin and Thor as well?
it didn't. I don't think it mentioned them directly, but It was something about just how these stories were, the Germanic gods proceeded, but God was speaking to these people in this way, right? So, like, this is something that might be hard for people to wrap their heads around, but we grew up in North America hearing a story, a Christian story, right? Now we're listening to a Christian story being told to pagan Saxons. And it sounds like a different story to us because they have a different culture. So we're taking that story and we're entering into it. But they're understanding that story coming from their Germanic tribal roots, right? And Odin and Christ are very similar. And so what the author of the Heliand is verifying is that God was speaking to these people all
Right.
the time, all the time. Okay. And now he's coming along to, like Paul says at Mars Hill, I have a name for you, right? And he was human. And although most of the Germanic gods, I have to say, were human, okay?
Yeah.
They were actually mortal. Yeah.
Human, far
So,
too human, if Nietzsche's to be believed. But
Well, I thought you were
yeah.
quoting Ray Zombie. More than human. More human
Yeah,
than human.
I like that. I like that, Shari, because it's I think it's giving me words for a feeling that I haven't been quite able to ever put into words. But it's something about the way that in God's grace, and I should just speak for myself. It seems that he was that it was his good pleasure to allow me to, by misunderstanding unto misunderstanding unto misunderstanding, get closer and closer and closer to the truth. And that there's a real kind of maybe misunderstanding is doesn't give the right impression, but I think you see what I mean. Like, there's a
well,
way in which
here's
I could
how
look
I've
back at
got.
my life and see, oh, I was wrong about that, but I was heading in the right direction, kind of a thing.
Yeah, okay. So here's how I've thought about it too. Hi, Nick. Is in the narthex of the church, of the Orthodox Church, you often will find the Greek philosophers, poets, and so on, right? They're there because there's a continuous story being told. Like, to me, whenever someone claims Calvinism because they believe in the sovereignty of God, I'm like, okay. That's God's sovereignty to me. We are in a story that this is why I keep saying in this little corner, we need to understand the story we are in. And we can do that by reading, as Lewis said, as Tolkien said, as Barfield says, as all these people, MacDonald, read the myths. It's all there. It's all there. The story is still being told. You got a comment, Nick?
No. How's my audio?
Good.
Great.
No, I thought McMo was cooking earlier. I like the Tower of Babel icon that Jeremy shared. I had never seen that, though I think I was familiar with the idea. Because one of the things that's always stuck out to me in Revelation is the image there is that it implies like nations will not be done away with. Like peoples, tribes. That there is a goodness in identity on that level. So anyway, with what McMo was bringing there, even with like the American South, was a I was picking up what he was throwing down.
I think of it like wine. where wine comes from grapes. It's fermented grapes, but it's dependent on the type of grapes you use, and it's dependent on the yeast that you use, and those grapes are dependent on where they grow and what the climate's like where they grow. So orthodoxy is the pattern, but there's Greek Orthodoxy, there's Russian Orthodoxy, there's Antiochian Orthodoxy, there's American Orthodoxy, and those are
Calvinist
all like,
orthodoxy.
yeah, those are all different flavors of wine, right? The wine is the pattern, but then there's the different vintages of wine, and even the year that the wine is made affects the taste of it. Every glass of wine you have is going to be different than the last glass of wine you had, right? Like, thank God, like that's what makes it beautiful. But it's still wine.
Still wine.
What's that?
But it's still wine.
Yeah, it's still wine, exactly. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of these patterns, I think of these patterns in the same way, right? Where the iconography is a pattern, like those patterns are being revealed, but the Ethiopian icon looks very different than a Byzantine icon.
Yeah, and what I often think about too is the experience that like Saint Herman of Alaska or Saint Innocent had with the Aleut people, where they already knew the story. They already knew the story. I love that. They had Saint Innocent, met the shaman, and the shaman already knew he was on his way, and everybody was standing in their best dress waiting for him to arrive. And he's like, "How did you know I was coming?" And they said, "Well, the Shining Ones told us."
Yeah.
And as a previous Plymouth Brethren conservative Christian, I kept asking people, well, who the heck are these wise men anyway? Who are these guys? Nobody could give me a satisfactory answer.
Yeah.
Nobody. And there's a fantastic thing in here by Saint Nikolai Velimirovich. Let me just read this. You guys keep talking and I'll find it. I have it on my iPad. It's better.
Well, in the meantime, I can't resist the temptation to bring up the latest Kierkegaard I've read, which I think does apply.
Love it.
So it's in the book Works of Love, and it's a chapter on the phrase "Love seeks not its own." And I'm going to fail to reproduce the full argument here, or even the full concept or idea, but I think what's pertinent here is that relationship between the universal and the particular. And what Kierkegaard stresses is the way in which, for love to seek not its own, and of course for that to incorporate the divine name, God is love, in some real sense, and this gets down to ontology, right? That like that God has gifted us our individual being, our particularity, and that there's a real sense in which both in Christian love, but also I think in divine love, it's not just a kind of mere tolerance of difference, right? But it must be a real joy in, I struggle for words, but it's something like a real joy in the will of God to create this individual, this particular, and you can blow it up to community or to nation, at will, because I think it's the same pattern, right? Like there's a real sense in which the love of God is so, it's such a fountain overflowing that it can't help but produce on an ontological level these other beings, right? This diversity of being. Right. Yeah. And so it's for God's good pleasure that particularities exist. Yes. And they wouldn't exist if it weren't for God's good pleasure. And so there's a real, I don't know, it's almost too deep of an idea for me, but there's a real joy, a real comfort, but also a real responsibility and a real kind of soberness that comes to mind when when thinking about that. But I think it plays right in with what we're talking about, this translation, this preparing of the way, the way in which God prepares those who are outside of his chosen people or outside of the culture or dead in their trespasses. There's this way in which, like, God can prepare the dead for resurrection in a way that just doesn't compute for us. I don't know. Did that resonate?
It did with me. I don't think it did with Grizz.
Well, Grizz's comment is good. I mean, the thing is though, like there's always a marriage between like multiplicity and unity, or like to Grizz's comment, like particularity and similarity, something like that. So like with what we're describing with like this idea of like all the nations, going to and fro, and like the French and the Irish, and or even within France, like how does it scale? Like who's to say what the identities are? I mean, these are kind of up to Providence, because even something like the United Kingdom, it's like before there was England, there was Saxony, and in Germany, you had Bavaria, and like all these, and then in the like early modern period, you sort of had this grouping together of particularities into a unity. But I'm not trying to make this just a geopolitical thing, because what the point I was going to bring up is that like in the you don't see a lot of this explicitly in the Gospels, because Christ says he's focused on the nation on the people of God, on the nation of Israel. But that's not because it's separated from service to the nations of the world. He's setting the pattern he's setting the cornerstone piece that's going to be repeated on the foundation. And this was a conversation I got into with some guys last night, where we were talking about that, like, if you want to, like, the best thing you can do for your family or for your tribe or for your nation in some ways is to forsake it. You see this in Christ's teaching, like you need to hate your father and your mother, like in relation to me. And you see this in the lives of the saints and the monks, that the most replenishing thing that can happen in an individual is to like go away and like give up on sort of civic on your civil duty, and just focus on the highest thing, just focus on God. And that has like this backwards effect on the actual community. That's what helps it. That's the sacrifice that makes the civilization keep going, instead of actual blood sacrifice that is the basis and keeps civilization going. That Christians have the opportunity to participate in that, to be that. So I don't know if that makes sense, but two things there. I was sort of responding to Grizz and then bringing up my own point in all of this, of like someone could sort of read the Gospels and be like, what the hell are you guys talking about? But I think in the Gospels you see the cornerstone piece being laid, that we're called to copy.
Well, and so for me, this ties to the Eucharist as well, where this was probably where and I'm not clear on the Roman Catholic doctrine nowadays. I have Roman Catholic family members, but we just don't talk about some things. And
Bruno.
But I will just say this ties into the way we see the Eucharist, as far as like and I think it was Saint Basil the Great, they used the example of putting iron into a fire, right? So the properties of fire are the heat and the light. And when you put iron into the fire, those properties of heat and light from the fire are transferred into the iron, and the iron is changed. The iron is transformed. The iron is hardened, and the iron takes on those properties of heat and light. Like if you pull the iron out, it's glowing and it's hot, but the iron has not changed into fire. The iron is still fire, but the iron has been transformed. And that's kind of and he used the same analogy for the Eucharist, right? So we offer up bread and wine. Christ comes down and turns that into his body and blood, but it still tastes like wine. It still tastes like bread. It hasn't been changed. Like, it hasn't changed into something else, but it has changed. It has been transformed. It hasn't lost its original essence, right? It didn't lose the essence of being bread. It didn't lose the essence of being wine, but it has been transformed into the body and blood of Christ. And he uses that same analogy for us. That's what theosis is. We're not losing who we are. We're not losing our original essence, but we are being transformed into sons of God. Right?
Yep.
We don't lose our individuality. We don't lose our particularity. St. Peter is different than St. Paul, and they will always be different.
Ethiopia is different than,
Yes. Ethiopian icons will always look like Ethiopian icons. They'll never look like Byzantine icons. Right. Russian wine will always taste like Russian wine. Greek wine will always taste like Greek wine.
I found my footnote. It says, it is not clear what figure might form the basis for this thought. Zoroaster might be thought of, but it is equally possible that this quote-unquote ancestor of the people of the East represents the fact that pre-Christian people had access to God's word, a thought not unwelcome to the Saxons. And I do know that there are two books that are spoken of as God's word. One is the book, the text, the Bible. The other is nature, creation. So, but it's interesting that the Heliand is leaning towards that, because in Saint Nikolai Velimirovich, Prayers by the Lake, he says, and I've read this before to Mi'kmaq, all the prophets have from the beginning cried out to my soul, imploring her to make herself a virgin and prepare herself to receive the divine Son into her immaculate womb, imploring her to become a ladder down which God will descend into the world and up which man will ascend to God, imploring her to drain the Red Sea of sanguinary passion within herself, so that man, the slave, can cross over to the promised land, the land of freedom. The wise man of China admonishes my soul to be peaceful and still, and to wait for the Tao to act within her. Glory be the memory of Lao Tzu, the teacher and prophet of his people. The wise man of India teaches my soul not to be afraid of suffering, but through the arduous and relentless drilling in purification and prayer to elevate herself to the one on high, who will come out to greet her and manifest to her his face and his power. Glorious be the memory of Krishna, the teacher and prophet of his people. The royal son of India teaches my soul to empty herself completely of every seed and crop of the world, to abandon all the serpentine allurements of frail and shadowy matter, and then in vacuity, tranquility, purity, and bliss to await nirvana. Blessed be the memory of Buddha, the royal son and inexorable teacher of his people. The thunderous wise man of Persia tells my soul that there is nothing in the world except light and darkness, and that the soul must break free from the darkness as the day does from the night. For the sons of light are conceived from the light, and the sons of darkness are conceived from darkness. Glorious be the memory of Zoroaster, the great prophet of his people. The prophet of Israel cries out to my soul, behold, the virgin will conceive and bear a son, whose name will be the God-man. Glorious be the memory of Isaiah, the clairvoyant prophet of my soul. And then he goes, O heavenly Lord, opening the hearing of my soul, I should become deaf to the counsels of your messenger. Do not slay the prophets sent to you, my soul, for their graves contain not them, but those who slew them. And I won't read the rest, but at the end he says, be wise, my virgin, and cordially receive the precious gifts of the wise men from the east intended for your son. Do not glance back toward the west, where the sun sets.
Somebody was telling me when they translated the Bible into Cantonese in Hong Kong, they translated Genesis. It said, "In the beginning was the Tao," Actually, it was when they were translating John,
Yeah.
and they said, "In the
Yeah.
beginning was the Tao," right?
Yeah.
And it totally ties in. It relates. It's what we're talking about. It's not a syncretism. It's just a it's the idea that, you know, not a hair of your head will fall without God knowing, right? It's like it's that idea that God knows all his creatures.
Well,
Right.
I
He
mean, if
doesn't
he
abandon
sees
us.
every sparrow fall, doesn't Jesus say this?
Yeah, exactly.
So
Right.
I feel so charged up right now. Like I feel like you guys are hitting all of the things that I've wanted to talk about for like the last 2 weeks.
Glory to
Oh,
God.
nice.
And part of it is because I reread Romans, you know, as the good Protestant heretic I am, you know, I had to find out which, you know, which heresy I was going to choose next. Um but there's so much resonance because I'm, you know, what Sherry said, I'm thinking of the first part of Romans where he says, you know, what can be known of God is clear to them. And I
Yes.
think oftentimes we read that as like a polemic or something, as like a as the first part of a sick joke that says you should have known better and that's why you
Right.
deserve the wrath of God. But
Mhm.
I don't think that that's the point of the passage, right? Like I think that even if it is the point, that there's still this fact of that, like
Well, that comes from
through
your perception of who God is. And
right, exactly. And so through nature or through messengers, angels, prophets, God is always preparing the way for the word. Um,
yeah.
and then I'm reminded of a conversation I had with Chad earlier today. We were discussing the new Sleep Token album. And we were I kind of mentioned just that sometimes it's a little too dark for me. You know, it reminds me of some of my musician friends who are they're God haunted, right? Like it's
Mm.
they're haunted by the divine. And Chad said something that resonated with me, which was it's a no doubt due to his work with alcoholics, but he said that there was something that resonated with him because there at least seemed to be a appointedness towards God. Like there's this way in which you can be in rock bottom, you can be in the child sacrificing Sodom, and that like the difference between the choice of like, you know, like what you were talking about, Cherry, like don't kill the prophet, right? And so there's this way in which the smallest step towards God is not going to go punished by our Heavenly Father, who gives better gifts than snakes.
Yeah.
And so that was ringing in my ear. And then with Jeremy talking about the Eucharist and with Nick, there I for the first time I think I was seeing this connection between our lives as living sacrifices, this type of, well, how could you be a living sacrifice? Because a sacrifice is something that you kill in order to give to God. You kill the potential in order to give it to God. And so for our lives to be this constant killing of potential is in some ways an absurdity, right? But then when you look at the Eucharist and you say the bread tastes like bread and the wine tastes like wine, and yet it's the body and blood of our Lord. You know, it's the very identity of the Godhead
That is
that
where
we're consuming.
and that is where the one and the many come together. It is both
Yeah,
particular,
absolutely.
right? And this is why Jesus's two natures are so important, McMo. That he is fully God and fully man. Just as the wine and the bread is fully wine and fully God, fully bread and fully God. That's all it's talking about, right?
Yeah. And then
So, yeah.
the only other thing that I wanted to maybe bring to bear to see if it sparks something for someone is the part of Romans towards the end that's been ringing in my head, which I can't I'm not going to be able to remember the full verse, but Paul says, and I was reminded by the part you read, Sherry, which is, and Paul says, and so who will who will uh who will ascend, that is to bring Christ down, or who will descend, that is to bring Christ up? And I don't know, like I get this great sense of peace in some sense, and forgive me if this is too particular to my tradition, but I get a great sense of peace that I think I think I can make it ecumenical and not particular, but that Christ is the one who has descended, and it's Christ is the one who was raised, and that the call for me is to be in Christ. And so that kind of, that particularity, being a living sacrifice to lose my identity, to be found in Christ, my identity to be found in Christ, is that kind of same movement of the universal and the particular, the translation and retranslation, the fully God, fully man, the fully bread, fully flesh, like that kind of pattern. I can't help but seeing that in a type of what I would have normally called substitutionary atonement, which is, I know, that's fighting words. But I do you see what I'm trying to point to? Is that kind of, he does it for me so that I can do it for him, is maybe the better way to put it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Take up your cross and follow me. Right. It's not. And then Paul says, it's not I who live, but Christ who lives in me.
I was just going to say that. Yeah.
I wanted to read one more thing, because I think this is something that really, really moved me when I read the footnote. It says, this forms a perfect companion piece to John the Baptist's upbringing. Zachary was informed that his son John was to be a warrior companion, Gisid, of the King of Heaven and Christ, and thus to be raised in the virtue of loyalty, Troia. Christ is to be the chieftain of many such warriors, and thus is brought up on the appropriate reciprocal value, love.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so do we ever think, I have never thought of the reciprocal value of loyalty to be love, because we don't live in that world. We don't live in
It's
a
because you're a
world.
woman, Shari. No, I'm just kidding. I'm sorry.
We don't live in a world where the chieftain loves his people.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
So John the Baptist is brought up with the virtue of Troia, loyalty, and Christ is brought up by the Virgin Mary as in the virtue of love. That has to be to all people. That has to be a universal. If he's the king, he's a king to all people, right?
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted
That loyalty piece for John the Baptist, and I want to let Charlie speak, because I don't think I've ever been on screen with Charlie before, so it's good to see you, Charlie. But there's, what you just said struck me very profoundly, Shari, with John the Baptist, and it, in some sense representing loyalty, because it just becomes so heartbreaking when he's in jail and he sends the messenger to Christ and he says, "Are you the one we've been waiting for?" And that kind of very vulnerable. Let me just say, I relate to that, and so it makes it hard to talk about without tearing up. But for John the Baptist, the loyal, raised in loyalty, the warrior, the warrior brother, the warrior cousin,
warrior companion, the
warrior companion. Yeah, for him to kind of be bearing his almost his pseudo cross, the pre pseudo cross of beheading for your cousin is well, that's loyalty, right? Like, that's loyalty, and it's not without its doubts, but it's despite the doubts.
Yeah, there's also something kind of what you were talking about before with your friends that you kind of see with love and loyalty is, I get this the right way, the way that they act in the spirit of those things. It's like the ultimate act of loyalty is to follow the words and the laws of Christ beyond any other authority. And what Christ does is he loves the people who hate him the most. Like, it's like his act of love is the thing that effectively kills him, because he loves the people who arrest him, he loves the people who judge him, he loves the people who crucify him, and that's the fullness of the way. And John is loyal to a message and loyal to Christ, that he pushes himself to the point where he is beheaded. It's not because he loves Herod, it's not because he loves any of the people killing him or something. He might, maybe that's sort of besides the point effectively, but like when Christ is the linchpin of this, it's present in it. It's interesting as well, Shari, like I don't know what you think, how if you think about it in this way, but people nowadays are they find it very necessary to see the reciprocation of their actions and of their end of the bargain. And it very quickly turns into a transaction. It's really interesting how, like, what do you guys think of in the balance of effectively what the duty is of loyalty without love, or with not seeing love, versus loyalty regardless of love, and vice versa the other way as well?
Well, see, that's bastardized to me. Like, if there's no love, if there's loyalty and the reciprocal virtue is not love, then both parties are at fault.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really good way to point at it, because I think a lot of people go like, oh, I'm already giving the virtue, but I'm not receiving it. But it's almost like, if
what is it that you're loyal to? It would have to be a proposition. It would have to be an idea, an ideology, right? Which would make it, and this is why the Bible boils it down to these two things. You either follow the person, and the person is love. That's how love is expressed, through the person, or you follow the idol, the thing that has eyes but cannot see, lips that cannot speak, right? It is not a person. It is an idea. So it is an inanimate, and you become that thing when you worship it. So you have eyes but cannot see, and ears that cannot hear. And I think this is why Jesus actually says, he who has ears to hear, let him hear. Because that is the person who is not an idolater, who is not sold out to an idea, who hasn't just given up, right, and stopped short, but continues to plumb the depths of the mystery of that person. And another thing that I find really interesting is, McMo said, John the Baptist said, are you the one we've been waiting for?
Yeah.
Paul says to the men on Mars Hill, I have the name of the one you've been waiting for. Saint Innocent arrives on the shores of the Aleutian Islands, and they say, you have come to give us this, tell us the name of the one we've been waiting for. This is what I mean about the story that's being continuously told to the people of the world, that there is one who is coming, and he has a name, right? Which means he is a person. That's what that means when something has a name.
It sort of goes back to the point of, like, the reason John asks Christ is because it's a real loyalty. Like, if he didn't question it, if he had unquestioning loyalty, it would be to an idol.
Yeah, but imagine the question. I'm just imagining it. I'm being empathic at the moment, and I'm imagining John saying, "Are you the one we've been waiting for? The one." That's just an ambiguous, who God only knows who that might be. It's like many Christians use the term Antichrist. They don't know what that is. They don't know who that is. It doesn't have a name. Okay, so it's an idea. But John says, "Are you the one?" And Jesus says, "He is." Jesus is the one. The one has a name. He's a person.
Yeah.
He has seen him, Yeah.
That makes me
also,
go ahead.
Good. Jeremy, go for it. Jeremy,
I'll be right back. Yeah, I'll be right back.
Getting his Big Daddy dictionary. Oh.
well, so yeah, you saying that about the Antichrist, Jerry, made me remember. I don't know how old I was, but I remember coming up with this joke that like as a teenager or a kid, that was like, the Antichrist has to be the opposite of Jesus. and so his name will be Sausage.
Oh wow. Oh
And
wow.
that was just like a dumb joke I came up with as a kid.
Yeah.
But on the topic of loyalty and love, I can't, when I think of loyalty, I just can't help but think of my wife, just because she's like a very loyal person. And I don't mean to put her
Mhm.
on a pedestal or anything like that, but just that like
Mhm.
one of her traits, and she would tell you this, is that she's a very loyal person. And oftentimes what that means is that she will go to bat for people that really do not deserve it. And so I'm thinking through that, and the difference or the way in which that loyalty must be reciprocal with love. And
Mm.
it's tempting
No,
it's
it
tempting to
doesn't
kind of
have
think.
not
Go ahead.
always. It's not always, but its reciprocal virtue should be love, right? Like so.
Mhm.
That's why I said if someone is loyal to something that isn't loving it, which means laying down its life,
Mhm.
then
Right.
it's a bastardization of those of what the healthy relationship between them should be.
Mhm.
It's not to say that every loyal person is in that reciprocal relationship to love. That's
Right.
not
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. Because I was trying to think of when my wife's loyalty has gotten her in trouble, and
Mhm.
it's almost exactly when
There's no
she has
love.
not had. Yeah, she has. Well, and there's two ways that absence of love, you could say, has shown itself. And I feel a little bit weird talking about my wife in this type of specifics, but I think in general, we could make it the Enneagram sixes, out there. You'll know what I'm talking about.
Amen.
But like, but that kind of yeah, there's two ways it can err, right? Like, you can go to bat for someone who really doesn't deserve it, and they're not being honest with you. And that would be
Mhm.
the type of idolatry, right? You're being loyal towards something that's doesn't deserve it.
Well,
But then go ahead.
here's a really cool example of that. Solzhenitsyn talks about it when he watched people from the Communist Party, like up in the hierarchy, showing up in the gulags. And man, did it remind me of the whole doctrine of total depravity, because they basically were just, because the way that kind of totalitarianism works, because you don't have that proper relationship between loyalty and love, is it eats itself, right? And so these people would end up in these gulags, and they would be wondering, they'd be doing their personal inventory, like, what did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? They can't find anything, like Job. They're like, but here's the deal. They don't say they're righteous. They say instead, they must have done something wrong, because
Mhm.
otherwise they wouldn't be in the gulag. Okay.
Mm.
Like, and man, I was like, this sounds like, total depravity to me, right? I'm just totally depraved. Like, it's in me. I can't see it. It's beyond me, and that's why I'm in hell. Like, that's
Mm.
that's how it goes.
I'm
And
Yeah.
going to cunningly avoid your jabs at my favorite theology, and instead,
no,
it's it,
I'm just telling you what it meant to me when I read
yeah,
that.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah,
That's what I'm telling you. I'm not
Mhm.
jabbing anything. I'm telling you exactly what it meant to me when I read it. I could see that
right.
same psychology at work, and
Mhm.
I was like, and this is a good illustration at the same time of how this lack of reciprocal virtue between loyalty and love,
Mhm.
how it plays itself out in the end.
Yeah. It's idolatry in the other direction.
Yeah.
Like it's not I know what the absolute good is. It's I know what the absolute hell is, or something like this. Whereas like in the truth is you don't, because it's a dynamic, active, living thing, and there's the moment you, and like you said before, the moment that you perceive something in an idolatrous way, you become an idol yourself. Like you're
become
shaped by it as well.
Or
Like
eyes
it's
and
the
can't see.
oh, sorry, I don't I have the, like, my wife is really, really loyal as well, and she's sort of, because we have a family now, she's learning how to walk away from people, and like when that line is drawn and all of that type of stuff. And it's interesting because you can't just do, it's not just a cut and run or go. It is one of those, like, it's an honest understanding of where you are in a relationship. Whereas, like, if you keep pushing into this way where it just continually eats itself, because that's what happens, and you just see yourself becoming a hollow shell, or you see, like, you know, the lessons aren't getting learned, or the things are, you're becoming a codependent part of someone's pathology. You walk away from it. But like, it's always an active, it's like grief. Like, the real version of it is it's like grief, where, like, she'll talk about, it's like, oh, sometimes I do miss this and sometimes I do miss that, and like acknowledging those things and knowing those different parts of it, that's what shows you that it's a real dynamic process, and that's like a real dynamic thing. In the same way that, like, when you're in an actual relationship and you're receiving reciprocity, it isn't, or you, like, even if it is reciprocal, do you always feel like you deserve it? Or do you feel like you're owed it? Or do you feel like, oh, that's the correct amount of what I've been given in? No, it's a flow state where you're just acting to a present moment.
Well, both of those things, both loyalty and love, are kenotic. They're both self.
Yeah. Yeah, because you cannot, because otherwise, because the moment that you try to rationalize or think or put something into its place, like, it's about trying to get yourself away from it. It's interesting as well, because, like, I still have, like, Sophrony talks about koinonia, like communion, as love of the other to the point of self-hatred. And I'm still learning what that fully means, because I still feel like I sometimes have a bit of a worldly language running in my background that blocks me.
I'm sure Saint Sophrony isn't thinking about it in modern terms. Like, he's thinking about it as a monk would. Where
would
he
Saint
knows.
Sophrony hate my self-hatred as much as I hate my self-hatred, or would he hate my self-hatred more than I hate my self-hatred?
Yeah, I think that's the problem, where it's like,
he would love you out of your self-hatred.
Love is the act of imbuing life into reality. Like, he talks about that's the movement between the persons of the Trinity. Like, they are self-emptying into each other, and through that sort of eternal dynamic love, they have the union is manifest, and that's how the world is created. Or, you know, that's how you understand it.
It's making me, I think I'm wrestling with this kind of idea of, well, I'm still very much interested in the official etymology from Jeremy's Big Daddy Dictionary for Loyalty.
This dictionary, this is huge. This is a big, I just got this today.
It's bigger than Jeremy's beard. That's officially a new measuring.
Yeah, that's
it.
It's like one beard or one dictionary.
This is just one volume. But it requires a magnifying glass because the type is only like 6 point.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah, it's amazing. So, loyal is actually, so let's see. It's from French, loyal, Old French, loyal or leal, semi-popular adverb, legal. So it's related to legal. It's related to law, legal, lex and law.
It would have to do with, like, loyalty in the sense of the warrior companion to the king would be like an oath, a legal binding oath.
Right? Yes. So I will, yeah. So the first definition is true to obligations of duty, love, etc., faithful to plighted. Whoa, plighted. What is that word? Troth.
I need a dictionary for the dictionary.
Plighted troth. I know. I need a dictionary for the dictionary.
Troth as in like betrothed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay.
The plighted, faithful to plighted troth. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, which is also a vow that binds two people together, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
So number 2, faithful in allegiance to the sovereign or constituted government. Also in recent use, enthusiastically devoted or reverential to the person and family of the sovereign.
Yeah, loyal to the king. It's also making me wonder about the connection between loyal and laity. I wonder if there's any connection there.
Yeah, that I can see that.
Well, the reason I ask is because there, it's it may be a stumbling block for me to try to conceive of loyalty as being this reciprocal virtue to love, without kind of holding that distinction of, the idea of the greatest of these is love. And so I can see loyalty being this kind of, in its proper sense, constrained by love or defined by love. But I think I'm still wrestling with what it means for it to be a kind of reciprocal virtue. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Well, to me, it implies the hierarchy, right? So loyalty is the servant or the subject loving the sovereign, and the love of the sovereign for it's like the self-emptying of the sovereign for the subject. That's what I'm thinking of, is like that's the reciprocal, where it's hard for us to relate to because of our modern, our government is totally not that. Our government is very divorced from that kind of sense, but there's a, thinking back to reading about monarchies, and Christ himself saying, if you want to be the leader among them, then you're the servant, right? It's like, if you want to be the greatest, you have to be the least. His love for, for the world, and being willing to completely empty himself and die for the world, is what brought us all to life. And so we have that loyalty back toward him as a result. It's like a devotion, because of he's already shown his love for us by dying for us. Then we have that loyalty, that devotion back to him. That's where I'm kind of floating around.
What about the difference, and I don't know if there is or not, but what's the difference between between sort of love and loyalty and mercy? Because in essence, mercy is sort of loyalty in love. It's not a sort of a transaction for, like, mercy in sort of the modern sense, where you sort of like, you're playing with your friends, you twist their arm and they go mercy, mercy, mercy. They're sort of asking for the transaction of just like, you're in control, like you can help me, but I cannot do anything, you just need to help me. But mercy itself is go.
Yeah. So I mean, one of the things that was interesting to me with what Jeremy was reading was that connection between loyalty and law, right? And that there's this and so that of course brings in, for me at least, the kind of classical Lutheran dichotomy of law and grace, and it's not just exclusively Lutheran, it's also in Romans 8, the law of the spirit versus the law of the flesh. But there is this real sense in which, even letter of the law, spirit of the law, that kind of idea. I don't know if I can completely bring home the idea that came to me, but yeah, there's something about, yeah. So it's the difference between, and this is also Romans. Sorry, y'all, I'm a broken record. I've just been reading Romans over and over again, so I'm just Roman coded. But
yeah.
But it's the difference between the loyalty of a slave and the loyalty of a son, right? And so
Mhm.
we have not been given the spirit of slavery to, to fall back or the spirit of fear to fall back into slavery, but we've been given the spirit of the son, in which we cry Abba Father. Um, and so I don't know. I guess I'm wanting to drill into that. Uh, yeah, there's the loyalty of the knight to the king, but there's also the loyalty of the prince to the king, and there seems to be some serious difference in that, and I don't want to take too lightly the fact that we've been adopted, and so that might mean that might have purchase on what we think of when we think of loyalty.
No.
Mm.
If you adopted a child, would you want that child to doubt your loyalty to them? Would you also
Mm.
want your parents to love them just as much as any other grandchild that wasn't adopted? Mm-mm. Not how it goes.
Mm. It's yeah. The dynamism of loyalty and love is so, I don't know. I'm trying to think if you want to think about them in sort of reciprocal ways, or like how they complete each other in the dichotomy. I think about them in the same sense of like the way that I've sort of have come to understand gender. It's like masculine is masculine is so feminine can be, and like there is a completeness within it. In the same sense, that is what love is. It's like love is like loyalty is so love can be. Like it is the creating of conditions for love, in the same way that love is creating the conditions for loyalty.
The whole thing, almond tree? The whole thing, Jason? That's a long sermon. Yeah. Well, you see, this is where I love the word that Jedediah shared with me. Adversity, because we miss the mark. So, there's always the ideal. Christ is the ideal,
Mhm.
and he demonstrates love and loyalty.
He does, yeah.
And then there's the missing of the mark, where we put our loyalty in the wrong places. We give it to things that don't love us back.
Mm.
And then we end up in a freaking gulag. Going, what the hell?
Yeah.
What
You know
went
what though?
wrong?
You know what I have to say though, like this keeps coming back to me, and I will share this because it keeps coming back to me, so it feels important that I do. There was an abbot of a monastery, and this is secondhand story. The abbot did not tell me this, but I know the person who the abbot told this story to. The abbot said there are women who come to this monastery as their parish monastery, as their parish church. And he said, there are 3 women who come here who have seen the uncreated light of Christ. And they have one thing in common. They all live with men who abuse them.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so I also know of a story. St. Paisios tells a story of a man who came to him who also had seen the uncreated light of Christ. And he asked him more about his life. And the man said, well, I'm married to a woman, but
Yeah.
she doesn't live with us, And he said when we got married, she was just very unhappy, and she wanted me to give her money so she could go out, and she would go out. So I'd give her money. I worked hard so I could give her money, and she would go out. and then she was so unhappy that she wanted to have kids. So, I saved money, and then she had a child, and then we had another child, and she was still just extremely unhappy. And then she wanted to go live in the city with her sister. And so he said, I gave her money, and she went to the city, and I didn't know where she was. I didn't hear from her. And he said, but I just kept praying for her and loving her and doing all I could to help her. And he hadn't heard from her in years. And one night when he was praying for her, Christ appeared to him. So, I hear what you're saying, Shari, but I will say I think there's a special grace that comes for people who can love someone who does not reciprocate and who does completely lose themselves. And this cuts against the grain of every, psychotherapy or all the modern advice on relationships. But I think it's worth saying that the whole point of love is to not think about what you're getting out of it.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think any of that does. I don't think that kind of loyalty that is reciprocated with love does think about. This is King Arthur and his knights.
Yes. Yeah. I agree with you. Yeah. I don't think we disagree. I just wanted to kind of flesh that out a little bit. I
know that one too. Yeah.
There's a lot of transactional relationship in the world, right?
Yeah. And also, like, I can't remember what church father said it, but the highest ideal for Christian love is love of your enemies. Like, it's not love of the thing that is most loyal to you. It's not the love that is the most reciprocal or what is closest to you. It's the love of what hates you. And that's the highest form of love. Like, that's the one that is the sort of the goal to almost get to. That is hard effectively, because it tells people to not to just put themselves to be okay where they are. I don't know, to be happy with their, like, an unfortunate lot. I think the hard thing is, like, to know that these types of things, they apply to you, but they don't apply to others through you. This is not the judgment that we get to give to others, but this is the judgment that we give upon ourselves. And our duty to others is completely different almost.
Yeah. So the words loyalty and duty keep coming up, right? And I wonder, I feel a temptation to hear what you said, Jeremy, and think of it not as a gift of God to those suffering like him, but instead as it being a kind of transactional, well, if I can love the unloving or the unreciprocating, then maybe I could see the uncreated light, which I'm with Jason. I would love what is the uncreated light of God before my heretical brain gets going on it.
Have you ever looked at someone, a human being, and saw something deeply godly in them that is the uncreated light?
I don't think I want to tell you whether or not I've seen that. But I because I'm wondering about this thing with this thing about duty, right? And LOL duty, middle school brain takeover. But there's almost a sense in which let's say loyalty informed by Christian love is not, like, duty becomes almost the result. It's not the duty is not taken up as the main task. It just is kind of a secondhand kind of course, I'm dutiful,
Yeah.
but that's not it can't be forefronted, because then you're back into the law, right? The works of the
Mhm.
law. And it's that same type of reciprocal, that reciprocation obsession that would
What
lead
if
someone like me to think, I'm going to love the unlovable so that I can see the divine light, type of situation.
what if your duty, like whatever you feel your duty bound to, is simply to um, facilitate life? Like
Mm.
I don't mean that like as a flat one-dimensional simply, but your duty leads you towards the thing that allows life to be. So your duty as a husband is to procreate and have children. That's a duty, right? For life.
Mhm.
Your duty as a mother is to accomplish all the tasks, make sure that the children are fed and safe and, you know, have their manners and so on, so that they can function in the world. That's your duty is aimed towards life. So
Yeah.
And outside yourself, I heard this abbot.
there we go.
He said, I'm concerned with these young people coming into the church because they read the stories of the lives of the saints, and they read of a saint who's praying and he's floating above the ground,
Yeah.
and they go, wow, I want to be like that. And he said the
Mhm.
problem is they don't understand that saint has no idea he's floating off the ground when he's
Mm.
praying.
Yeah.
He's praying out of love. It's out of it's his selflessness that is what opens that up. It's his pure devotion in prayer to communion that opens up that experience. So instead of the instrumentality that you're kind of mentioning, McMo, of like, oh, I'm going to love these people so I can get that's exactly what will keep Christ ever hiding from you.
Mhm.
is the instrumentality. It's the running to him in prayer every time you've crossed him, or every time every time that you've disappointed him in a relationship, and then you run to him and say, I'm sorry, please forgive me. It has nothing to do with please forgive me so that I can be floating in prayer.
Yeah.
It's the idea of the relationship rather than the instrumentality or the transactionality. I think that's one thing that it's taken me a really long time to heal from my young relationship with God, is that the Mormon view of God is very transactional, right? They have a scripture that says every blessing in heaven is a result of obedience to the law on which it is predicated.
Yeah.
Right?
Whoa.
That is pure transactionality.
Yeah.
Right. And that's been very difficult for me. And it's what you were talking about, Shari, where the people go, well, I'm not getting blessings, so I must not be doing something right. And I'm just always reminded of that story from the scriptures where where there's the blind man who was healed, and the apostle said, well, or the disciple said, well, who was it who sinned? Was it him who sinned, or was it his parents? And Christ said it was neither.
Mhm.
He wasn't. He was that way so for the glory of God.
Right.
Right. It's like this. We're trying to assign this causality to things that are divine. We don't know. They're God's providence.
Yeah.
And I think that's. I've been trying to repent of my own transactionality in my relationship with God, and instead, when I don't feel like praying, I make myself pray more. And it's just because I
Mhm.
want to teach myself that it doesn't matter what I like. It doesn't matter what I want. It doesn't matter that my feet
Can I
hurt.
say something, Jeremy? Because
So,
you just
yeah.
said something there. When I don't feel like praying, I make myself pray more.
Yes.
I've struggled with my demon, my dutiful demon, most of my life.
Yeah.
It has kept me from being creative. It has kept me from loving myself. It has kept me from having compassion on my own struggles. It has kept me from being creative. starved me of my creativity because it constantly reminded me that there was just one more thing to do.
Yes,
Okay.
that can also be a disease. Yes,
And no, it was like very bad because when I
Yeah.
lost my ability to do things, I just wanted to die. Okay.
Yeah, because you
And
identified with those. Yeah,
because I was useless if I couldn't do something, if I
Right.
couldn't do my duty, especially. So I have a thing where if I feel like I have to pray because it's my duty, that's when I don't. And this is just really illustrative of the contextuality of our lives and why
Right.
I think we need the lives of the saints in order to parse out how do we move, how do we act, what do we say, what do we do? Because guess what? If you read the lives of the saints, you'll find out that it's not the same for any of them.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Right.
and that goes for us. So I would never say to somebody, if you feel like it's your duty to pray, don't. I would never say that to someone. But it happens to be what I have to do for myself. Because if I don't, I will die. I will shrivel up and die, and so will my prayer life.
Yeah.
I'm
Paisios
just
says
too good at
it's
making
like that.
excuses for myself, so I have to. I have to say, Lord, I don't want to do this. Please see my stupid complaining sacrifice as
Well, I'm still trying to
an act of devotion and an act of trying to move closer to you.
Yeah,
I had
I'm still right. Like, is this me saying I should pray, or is this God saying no? You should pray right now. And so, oftentimes, I'm automatically like, no, and I'm not being contrarian, actually. And then there will be this like secondary gentle is the key word reminder, and then I know, okay, it's not me then. You know?
Yeah.
Because Shari would never be gentle with herself.
I would never be gentle with myself. I'd be like, you asshole. You're not doing your duty. See, I told you you were a loser. I told you were a loser.
That's I always have that whenever I write. Like whenever I only say that I'm writing, or I call myself a writer when I'm like actually in the slog, which I'm still not in. But I know I'm a writer when I can write something bad and finish it and keep going. Because before that time, I'm trying to make something really good, and I'm pushing myself into the value, and I'm forcing it to be good, and I want it to be fantastic. And even if it's accidentally good, I'm just like, no, because I'm in that transaction period. I'm in that period where I want to be writing for the understanding of, I don't know, a great sentence or whatever it is. And instead it's like, no, I want to have that duty to the thing that I love. And the duty is actually, despite the result, it's against anything that's good. Before I forget it, when we were talking about sort of the transactional and like sort of trying to avoid the temptation to look towards the miraculous as spiritual guidance, Saint Anthony the Great had a quote that sort of rang up that said, to see an angel is not a miracle, to see your own mistakes is. And
wow,
like
that's so true.
that's because it's real. It's like you can see, like, seeing holy things and seeing an uncreated light is as easy as looking at a person, just like Shari said. And that is one thing, but it's like to try to like humbly take everything as an honest retrospect onto yourself. That's the difficulty. And that's the thing that's praising. That's the miracle.
Yeah.
So I need to go to sleep. Because it's like almost midnight here on the East Coast.
Lame.
But I want to.
And you're working.
I know.
So weak.
I'm so late. I have to work tomorrow. Yeah, I'm gonna have to.
I'm just having lunch.
None of the rest of us have to work tomorrow. You're right.
Yeah.
But so I wanted to maybe leave a couple of things on the table, which is not polite
Mhm.
if this were a dinner party. But
Just as long as it's
yeah,
not your feet. Not your feet.
yeah, and I'll keep my feet below the table. So one of the things that was coming up for me was the parable of the workers in the field, where the workers that come at the end of the day get the same pay as the workers who come at the beginning of the day.
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
that raises the kind of obvious maybe contradiction or stumbling block or something that um was God unloving or unloyal towards those early workers, like there's something about that. But then that brings up the idea of fidelity versus loyalty, or fidelity and loyalty. And
But
and
wait,
that
Mel, can I just say, like,
yeah, go ahead.
do you think that verse, God is no respecter of persons, has anything to do with that parable? Like he's
I'm
not
not sure.
he's
That
not
might be a little
favoring. He's not
that might be a
favoring.
little yeah, that might be a little too much for my sleepy brain to
Okay.
synthesize with all the stuff that I'm trying to hold together.
Mhm.
But I'll definitely think about it.
Okay.
Yeah, because I think you're right. I think there is something about that that's at play.
Mhm.
Mhm.
But the the idea that I kind of wanted to put forth was the idea of that God is faithful, right? And
Totally.
so
Mhm.
yeah, there's obvious, a lot of times, especially in Protestantism or whatever, we talk about the need for faith in the Christian and the believer and the children of God. But
Mm.
so much of that rests upon, of course, the faithfulness of God. And so when I think of the faithfulness of God, that obviously leads to the fidelity of God and then the loyalty of God. And and then of course that kind of, I think, ends, at least for the human perspective, in terms of like marching orders, is something like waiting on the Lord. And that waiting on the Lord works itself out in the types of common sense activities that can be described as loyalty. Um, and yeah, I don't know if I'm fading fast, y'all. I'm sorry, but because I don't know if I
It's okay.
can fully connect it back. But there's something about the fidelity of God, the faithfulness of God, and that kind of working itself out in the loyalty and the love that we show towards one another, that I don't think I can quite stick the landing. But this has just been so great. I think I need to call it for
Okay.
myself.
All right.
You guys keep going.
Good
I'll
night,
I'll
mate.
listen in. But
Love
good
you.
night.
Yeah.
Mo, thanks for coming. It's good to
Bye
see you.
bye.
Yeah.
Well,
Well, I just want. Yeah, you go, Sherry.
I'm just going to say, Jason asked me to read this earlier, so I thought I would just read a portion of it. It's Inexorable Love by George MacDonald, from his
Mm.
Our God is a Consuming Fire sermon. And he says, love which will yield to prayer is imperfect and poor. I love that.
Mm.
Love which will yield to prayer is imperfect and poor, nor is it then the love that yields, but its alloy. For if at the voice of entreaty love conquers displeasure, it is love asserting itself, not love yielding its claims. It is not love that grants a boon unwillingly. Still less is it love that answers a prayer to the wrong and hurt of him who prays. Love is one, and love is changeless. For love loves unto purity. Love has ever in view the absolute loveliness of that which it beholds. Where loveliness is incomplete, and love cannot love its fill of loving, it spends itself to make more lovely, in proportion to its divinity, and will go on creating. Oh, sorry. It strives for perfection, even that itself may be perfected, not in itself, but in the object. As it was love that first created humanity, so even human love, in proportion to its divinity, will go on creating the beautiful for its own outpouring. There is nothing eternal but that which loves and can be loved. And love is ever climbing toward the consummation, when such shall be the universe, imperishable, divine. Therefore, all that is not but beautiful in the beloved, All that comes between and is not of love's kind must be destroyed, and our God is a consuming fire.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'll add to that with the Emily Dickinson quote, that love is all there is all we know of love. It is enough. The freight should be proportioned to the groove.
Yeah. That groove is the context of your life. That's what I was talking about earlier.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's the
And
love
that's why
that
it's really
sort of
hard.
culminates.
I find it's really hard to give people advice. And I think like what I'm learning, I'm still learning. I'm very much learning. But what I'm seeing in the Orthodox Church is instead of telling people how to live, they tell them to read the lives of the saints. That's what they say.
Yeah.
Because that is how you learn to live. And I've mentioned this before, like Jeremy, a friend of mine was reading the Philocolia, and he said it's so interesting because you see the monks going in, like have all this instruction, go into your cell, stay in your cell, fast, pray, don't come out, don't talk to anybody, don't eat, don't sleep, don't lay down, don't, right? And then all of a sudden it goes, what are you doing in your cell? Get out of your cell, get into the garden, go into the village, make yourself useful. And it's also that feasting and fasting cycle that you see over and over again, right? So there's this call to go, and it reminds me again of George MacDonald, and John 10:9, where you're going in and out, right? Through Christ. He's the door, and through him you go in and out. That's your freedom. Your freedom is in that. You can't go in and out. Like, how does George MacDonald put it in Lilith? He says, home is where you can go in and out. Because the guy's like, I want to go home. And he goes, you can't go home. Home is where you can go in and out. And he's playing on John 10:9 as well, right? So that's where home is. Home is when you go through the door, who is Christ. And but it's also, to me, a little bit indicative of respiration, which is the Jesus prayer, right?
Right.
Yeah.
In and out. It's and what is our breath? It is the Spirit, okay, of God, who gives what? Life. So when we are going in and out, when we breathe in and out, we are alive. We are living. That's what we're called to do. That's our mission, folks. Okay, you got it. Go forth and multiply. That's what God said to Adam and Eve.
It's in his name. Like, that which savors the anointed one. Like, the savior is going down and the anointed is going up. Like Jesus Christ. It's that full breath of love. And it's, I don't know, the reason that
I was working with my, sorry.
No,
go ahead.
I
was working with my daughter in the garden. Sorry.
You go. I'm a hemisphere away. You finish.
You go, Charlie.
Okay.
You go.
I do have to go. I wanted to say to the sort of the parable of the workers in the field, and the sort of the reason that it's not a transaction is like, it's because the perspective that you're trying to have is that you're always with him. And if you find somebody who's been without him, and when they found him, that's a cause for a celebration. It's the same with the parable of the prodigal son. was like the son that's been there the entire time is like, what's going on? And his father goes, you've always been with me. Everything that I have is yours. But someone was lost and is now found, and that's a cause to celebrate. It's not a lowering of anybody who's close. It's not a lowering of anybody who's sort of outside. It's because anybody who's home in Christ is like Christ in the sense that they are happy when someone comes close. That's the joy. That's the joy. It's not the joy in the transaction of sort of, well, now you're in, you get this sort of amount sorted to you. It's like, no, once you're in, he's in you. And you're participating in his joy and his glory and in his breath, kind of like you say. It's like, go out and multiply.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's about making sure that the center is Christ, not you. It's like, it's very easy to just
even know
say
if you can make sure.
Yeah,
Like,
you're right.
You know what I mean? Like, it almost feels sinful to move in such a way that you are making sure that Christ is the center of your life. Like, wouldn't it be better? Like, I don't know. I just think about it in father and son or father and daughter terms. Like, do you want your child to be constantly making sure that they call you father and that, you know what I mean? Like, or do you just want to have this beautiful, loving, caring relationship with each other of trust built, you know, troia, loyalty and love, right? To each other. I think that the more we speak in terms of making sure of things and, you know, this is what we must do and all that kind of thing, I think we end up, we can, and I'm not saying, like I said, it's really hard to give people advice, right? But I would be careful that doesn't become our own idolatry, you know, is that idea. Because, you know, I just keep thinking of, I don't have his book here, but Father Roman Braga and Father Saint Seraphim of Sarov, you know, these men were like incredibly holy men, and they suffered greatly in their own lives physically. And they didn't spend all their time groveling at, you know, for mercy from God. You know, both of them talk about prayer as sometimes a sigh, sometimes a wish, right? And the beauty of that, of thinking about it like that, I think, is that you realize how much of a conversation you're in all the time with God. You know?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. The make sure and the oughts is like. Well, the make sure and the ought, the make sure, making sure and the ought, it turns laws for humility into rules for humiliation.
Oh, beautiful. Nice.
I see it well.
I'm gonna have to my partner in crime is getting really tired over there.
Yeah, I'm tired.
It's getting late.
I gotta work in the morning.
It's not late for me, so keep going. Yeah, call it now.
So.
All right. Good night, guys.
So yeah. Good night. Bye, Charlie. Thanks for joining us. Yeah. So anyway, thank you everybody for joining us for another episode of the Heliand, and we will see you all next week. Bye, Nick. Bye, Jeremy.
See ya.